So, for those that are watching, this is episode 3 of the Dangerous Game Podcast, season 1. Though this is technically like episode 38 if you count all the old ones I did. This episode, guys, I will be joined by my current collegiate coach, Flaress. He coaches League of Legends. He's technically our head coach for all games, but his speciality is in League, and he's been doing that for 4 or 5 years now. So we brought him on so that we could actually talk about some collegiate league. Um, so Flares, feel free to introduce yourself real quick so that folks kind of get an idea of your background in League of Legends.
For sure. Yeah, I've been coaching for about 4 years now, collegiately, going on 5 here this fall. Been playing league since season 3. Around then, I've peaked challenger, and at this point now, I just kind of settle in the hard stuck D2 Masters range. You know, a little, just kind of don't have to go that hard anymore. Grind 15, 20 games a day just to try and sit there and maintain peak performance. But other than that, I've had a wide variety of different roles going in from collegiate, being able to help me out. So that's what I do.
Dope. So let's start off with probably the most I'd say probably the most least understood topic about collegiate league. What rank do people need to be to try for any type of teams? Like what do they need to bring to the table to be able to become a collegiate League of Legends player?
If you asked me 4 years ago, I would say at least gold. At this point now, though, with how bad collegiate has been getting for League of Legends, especially recruiting for League of Legends, um, I would say you could get away with being any rank. You could probably if a director is forced to try and get a league team, they're gonna accept whoever plays because nobody's going home playing League of Legends anymore. They're going home playing Valorant, Call of Duty, etc. So now, I mean, you can leverage yourself pretty good deal if another team is trying to at least keep their league team.
Yeah, and I think that a big emphasis I like to make on that same topic is the fact that um, while anybody that's silver or such can probably find a spot on a league team, this is for a majority of teams. Now, the teams that people know about, your UC Irvines, your Maryvilles, even University of St. Thomas, these big teams that are competing at the highest level of collegiate and into semi-amateur, um, they have standards that are going to be much higher than the average college, but it's a pretty big misunderstanding by a lot of folks that you have to be super talented. The biggest thing that we look for, like Ryan just said, is somebody that's motivated, somebody that wants to learn, somebody who is willing to put in that time and effort. So it kind of comes down to just it's not quite at the level that other collegiate competitions are at. Basketball is going to be scouting for the best players, and that gets narrowed down from the best high school players to then, however many they need for best college players. And then from college, that gets narrowed down even more into the NBA. There's not kind of a network going for League of Legends at the moment. So really whoever wants to come in, as long as you're dedicated and want to, that's kind of the biggest thing.
Man, I know some programs will just stick someone on who's never played just to sit there and fill the roster. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, this season I think we ran into at least two or three teams in our competition that were just people that were just to fill the roster. I remember that jungler that said that was his last collegiate game. He'd played like 3 games. He was bronze, brand new to the game, and he was just done after they lost to us. They're just taking whoever will play at this point. So if you actually play League, you have a very good chance of going collegiate if you want to go that route. Um,
here's
but
the other thing though is that just because you sit there and can join a team though is that the likelihood of you improving, sure, you have your teammates going to help you out, but that's pretty much all you're gonna get is only your teammates helping you out because most places don't have coaches or coaches in place for that. And if they do, it's probably for a program that's levels much higher than the average, like how we were talking about with like Maryville.
Yeah. So, what do you think for players that want to get into the league, collegiate league, that also want to use it to improve, that are going to go to a school that doesn't have a coach per se, but has just you and your teammates? What would be a route that they could go to pursuing ways of getting better themselves?
Well, first off, they have to just show up and say that they want to play. That's the first step. But when it comes down to improvement, they need to look at how many rank games they're playing. Are they just a normal ARAM player, or are they someone who just sits there and grinds rank repeatedly day after day? And sometimes that's a bad thing. If they're just playing ranked but they're stuck forever and they're not improving, that means they need to change their outlook. So how do they change their outlook? Well, it can't be your team's fault every single game. One thing I'm very firm believer on is the 60-20-20. Where 60% of the games are out of your control, where 20% of the games is within your control, and then the 20% of the other 20% is just you're gonna lose, right? So if 50% and the 20%, sorry, the 60% and the 20%, somewhere in that range, most people sit there and get stuck around 50%. And so if you're stuck at 50%, like, sure, that might be nice, but it's how you leverage your 20%. And most of the time, 10% of the games you're going to win that are in your control. And the other 10%, you're not. And that's how you get stuck at 50%. So it's about sitting there and leveraging that 10% on average to something like 12%, 15%. If you can sit there and be around a 55 to 60% um, win rate, that's what you want to improve on. So how do you do that? Okay, well, that means playing less. You need to be in a mindset to win, and you have to sit there, unfortunately, to mute pings, play your own game. Don't watch videos. Don't go watch, all these different guides on there because most people are just blowing smoke up your butt. You got a game that's constantly evolving every 2 weeks. You have to read the patch notes. And unfortunately, yeah, I would say the easiest way is to play meta. But I mean, you can take a one trick and sit there and get all the way to diamond.
Yeah, 100% on a lot of that. I think I want to kind of elaborate more on that 60-20-20, because the way that I had heard it was that it was the way I had been told about that one was that it was 40% of games that are just complete coin flip. They can go either way. 30% of games that you're guaranteed to win, 30% of games that you're guaranteed to lose. So in those 40% of games, you have to figure out a way to leverage majority of that in your favor so that you can actively start climbing. So those are the games that are quote unquote coin flip. Those are the ones that you have the most ability to impact. The ones that are 30% wins, those auto wins, it's just like, oh, your team's just diffing the crap out of everybody else. So like you just win the game because your team is just that much better than the other team. The ones that you lose, it's somebody's inting, somebody leaves the game. Your team's just getting completely gapped across the game. And so for me, in terms of like finding that consistency to climb, a big part of it is not necessarily always going to be in-game strategies as well. I think that there's a lot of mental strategies you have to be able to accompany for it, right? Like so that mute all pings to be able to play your game. That's to be making sure you're not losing the mental game, because if you're going in tilted, if you're going in with the thought process of I just have to win, I just have to win, you're not focusing on the individual things that you need to do in those games. So there's 40% of games where you have to be able to make the right decision and change how you're playing the game and adjust so that you have better chances to win those 40%. You're going to lose if all you're focused on is having to win or God, I hate my team, right? Like you're not focusing on the game. So for players that are struggling with the mentality of the game, what would you recommend? What are good ways to break down those 40% of the game so that they can find ways to not make it seem less difficult, like such a daunting task of just like, oh, okay, all right, you give me the strategy, I need to play meta. You give me the strategy uh of I need to just focus on winning the game. How does somebody make that feel less daunting? Like what is the like first step for that?
Step one: uninstall League of Legends. Um, No, so if you want to sit there and overcome the mental hurdle, which unfortunately it used to be like, oh, you need your mechanics and macro in order to really win, but now it's more leaning towards how can you not ensure, or sorry, how can you ensure your teammates and yourself's mental from not exploding? I still see games all the way up in Masters and below just being decided on one person being mentally weak, and that mental fragility is why again I referenced the 60% where it's just out of your control. Sure, you can kind of leverage it, but now with I think just that there's a culture of a quitting culture almost in League of Legends. When things get hard, you just want to give up. And so the best way to sit there and go in there is to, one, you need to mute everybody's pings. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit harder to sit there and discern whether someone's missing or not, but that's also going to force you to be watching the map. Um, that's going to force you to be a much more aware player. And by sitting there and being more aware, you're going to be more informed on your decision making. And that's going to be the best thing, because now you can sit there and make a play based on information that you got, and then you're going to see, okay, I sit there and made the right play and I was rewarded for it, or I did the right play but I actually mechanically misplayed, or it was just bad and you learned from it. And that way you're not being influenced by external factors like someone spam pinging danger on your feet when in reality the play was actually good. um, Being able to just get that confidence in your own play is really going to help. And by that, no one's going to sit there and sway your mental if you're the one making your own decisions and playing around that.
That's an interesting thought there though that you just kind of provoked there for me, which was the you mute the ping so that they're not poking danger, so you don't second guess yourself. So how many times do you think that a player finds themselves getting stuck because they play that kind of react to your teams once more so than the needs of the team, right? Like where people will be calling for help constantly, especially as a jungler, like people are just gonna beg for ganks and stuff.
Like 90% of the player base.
Yeah, so you'd say okay, so 90% of the player base is just not thinking about, well, what do we actually need to win? They're just responding to what their teammates are saying to do.
Actually, no, let me rephrase that. I'd say 90% of them don't even give it a thought. I would say a lot of people try to sit there and be their own hero, right? And be the hero of the team. And that's why a lot of friction gets into these games. You have people, everyone wanting to be the hero, and not anyone willing to take the back seat. The problem is that um, a lot of the time it's just not identified correctly. If you have an 0 and 4 top laner, but they're spamming for ganks to help to pull them out, now that's time wasted that you could actually put into someone else. And so no one's able to correctly identify which is their win conditions, right? No one's able to correctly identify like how do they sit there and overcome like current game state as it changes. And that just goes back into, oh, I don't know how to sit there and I'm losing my train of thought, sorry. um
Nobody's really thinking about, okay, what is the best move I can make to win us the game here. They're just thinking, I need to make a play that makes me look like the hero, right?
yes.
So there's with that kind of topic, I think that one of the biggest things that I noticed in solo queue, especially in platinum where I'm at currently, is that a lot of folks want to play flashy champions, play the flashy characters that have the most quote unquote agency of the champions. But that agency is only there if you have an understanding of them. So would you recommend that people are playing these more mechanically intensive, more quote unquote high agency characters, or would you think that they need to play something that is just innately more comfortable or something more straightforward at least when they're trying to get that grind going?
I mean, if they're trying to get the grind going, comfort's always best. However, it's only going to get you so far, and eventually you're going to need those flashy champions. There's a reason why picks like Lisa and Nidalee are always like pretty much year round, never bad, right? Lisa could be one of the worst champions in the game, but like people are still gonna pick them because they have that playmaking potential, that one play that they can make to like win the game, right? Each time they're ult's up. Um, but you can only do so much if you're only like if you're a you're a Warwick jungle main, right? You're only gonna go so far. You can get to diamond, sure, but are you gonna get any further than that? No, because everyone knows how to play against Warwick at that level. You just kite and you sit there and you ward. Everyone knows how to sit there and play towards the side, and most of the time those ganks are not going to work out. And so the champions that have much more agency, much more options to sit there and be able to make a play that might not happen otherwise because they're not one dimensional, that those are what's really going to sit there and make you succeed.
So now that we've kind of touched on the idea of how these people self improve, what is something they can look for to be able to improve inside of a team environment? So if they don't have a coach, kind of building this team unity is going to be a big struggle for them. So if they join one of these teams, what's the expectation they can have realistically if they are trying to basically take the reins as a player to get their team unified? What should be their main objective to make the team playing as a team?
Man, you're asking me? um, Nah, it's definitely gonna have to come towards a lot of people having to set their egos aside. Um, when it comes down to the team building, they're just gonna have to accept, look, I might not be the best player, or I might not be the most knowledgeable, but you have to be able to just deal and roll with the punches. You can't just sit there and go with one person's say all the time, especially within a team. Even if they're like high diamond, doesn't mean that your voice doesn't matter. Um, everyone should be able to accept an opinion, but they also have to be able to refute it or at least defend it. Um, and I think that's where a lot of people just get mixed up because they don't want to step on toes. I actually think the best thing to do is to step on toes, but everyone has to have that level of maturity to be able to accept an opinion and then either agree to disagree or at least work towards finding a solution.
I think I agree with a lot of that, or all of that actually. I think you still need to be cautious how you step on the toes because it's so easy to go a little overboard on it though, where you're trying to push back, on somebody because you're trying to make sure that you're working out all the kinks in a problem there, but like there's a way of pushing it too far to the point that that person concedes their point, but conceding their point is the right one, and now you force them out of it, and now you're going to end up as a team like playing incorrectly, for instance. So for instance, like let's say that there was a dragon flip, but the dragon flip wasn't the right play, but arguably your team could do it because they're overall stronger at that point in the game. Though they're coming in late, they're coming into a bad position, they have to force their way through a comp that's really good at stalling. And ultimately they get the dragon, but they lose a couple of people, but it doesn't cost them the game. But there's scenarios outside of that game where doing that against a better team would lose you that game. So, you argue with the person that's saying that we need to not do that again because that's a problem. and you get them to back down. So at what point, how do you realize who's actually more in the correct in solving the situations? Because there are going to be situations that arise like that where one person's
Time.
right, one's wrong. It's just going to be
It,
coming
it,
down to time.
it's going to come down to time, and that's what a lot of teams in collegiate have problems with, is because they usually meet 2 or 3 times a week, maybe even less, and most of the time they're not playing outside of practice together. And so they'll sit there and go play their solo queue. They'll maybe duo if they're really hit it off with one other person on the team. Um, but then like once they come into practice, it's like, okay, what's the schedule for the practice? Is it going to be scrims, and you only have 3 4 hours to get really one big block in, where that situation might not happen. And so if you're not playing every single day, 5 6 days out of the week, at least for 2 hours, 3 hours, it's going to be tough to sit there and really recreate these things, because the reason why time will fix it is because you're going to get these scenarios that happen again, and it's either not going to fix itself, because you guys are still doing the wrong play, or you guys see, oh hey, we could have done this differently back when you watch it back. And it's like, oh, what we did, what we said didn't work here, but little Timmy said mentioned this 2 weeks ago, and actually would have been right here, and there you go, right? It's just a matter of how much can your team play.
And you did allude to it a little bit when we were talking about team melding together, which was the idea that some people would have to you're going to have to put your egos aside. How does a team that only has 5 people on it fix the fact that they have a person that is exceptionally egotistical? Like, what is a way to be able to try to convince that person that they need to start playing for the team opposed to themselves?
Psychology says make them think it's their own idea. um, what I've found is that most of the time a lot of people give up and just throw their hands up in the air and just follow, and they're like, okay, well, if I can't win and I can't get a say in, and no matter what I say it's going to be refuted by that player, then the best thing to do is probably to just sit there, and I would say just do as that person says, and then when they fail and they fuck up, then that's their their way of, one, sticking it to that person, but also for that other person to, like, hopefully grow and overcome it. That's your hope, but what's likely going to happen is that they just shift the blame again. Um, and so, well, that means for 2 3 weeks or maybe even a month, you follow this person and you keep a record, right? You keep a record of all these mishaps or these miscommunications or these errors based on them, and be like, hey, look, here's a little list that we compiled. Yes, I was keeping score, and here it is. And every single time, this was your refute, and it's not adding up. So I think I think unfortunately that's just how the way you have to play it.
Well, on a even darker tone than that, do you think that Collegiate League of Legends can help save the road to professional essentially here in North America? I know that that's the topic that is the hot button topic right now, is North American League of Legends dying, which for most people it seems like it might be. Do you think that Collegiate could potentially has the potential to be the grassroots that then restabilizes the North American ecosystem?
Yes and no. So academy and the league underneath that, those are gone in my eyes within 2024. I'm sure they're going to vote to keep it because they're already budgeted to keep them for 2023, but 2024 they're gone. Most pro leagues just want to keep their main roster, and they don't want to keep academy and then their farm team. So now you're going to have 10 or more people, even coaches, etc., that are going to sit there and be out of work. Well, these players have dedicated mass amounts of time to sit there and go for this with no, they're right out of high school. So the only logical place for them to go now to utilize their skills is to a program that has tenure, shown that they're successful already, and then there you go. You have a full League of Legends team full of ex pros competing in collegiate, and then those ex pros can sit there and hopefully grow the next talent that might be some masters player, diamond player that they sit there and mentor and elevate because they're giving in all the insight, and then that player may have the room to grow to become something else. But on a on a darker tone is that there's currently a vote up to sit there and increase the limit for imports from 2 to 3. And if that's the case, NA talent, the talent pool just becomes that much less. And so in a game that everyone feels is dying, it's like what motivation is there for people outside of collegiate to go to pro, right?
Mhm.
Right now the motivation is, hey, I can utilize the skill to get me um, partial rides, maybe a full ride if you're just that good and the program can afford it, but mostly partial rides, and get yourself a degree and be like, okay, well, I'm set up for after these next 4 years to go get a job outside of it, and if pro happens, then there you go. That's about it.
So, do you think that this has the potential to kind of set up a kind of a bottleneck to a degree for North American pros? What I mean by that is, so like the NBA, for instance, you go through high school and there's 20, 30,000 high school basketball players. Say only a third of them go into college, and then only half, not even, only like 2% of those go into the NBA, and they're still competing with people from Europe, people from China. You're maybe not as much China. There's only been a handful of players from there, but you're still competing with people around the world for positions in the NBA, and it's created a very diverse and competitive environment. Do you think that if all these pros that are in the academy scene are forced into collegiate, it will then turn collegiate more competitive and potentially inspire them just that much more to try to push for those small spots that are remaining?
Honestly, probably not. I think what's going to end up happening is that eventually there's going to be a rule change to where the players that are overseas, especially in environments that are much more welcoming of that kind of culture of, oh hey, if I grind League of Legends for 12, 14 hours a day, like I'm going to be rewarded if I'm that much good of a player, right? And where you always think of NA work ethic. I mean, you have all these pros and pro coaches sit there and say, "Oh, it's like we do work hard," but then we sit there and go out internationally and we are embarrassed every year, right? And ultimately, that's another reason why people think NA is dying is because it's like, oh, okay, like why play on a server that's inferior? Why play in a region where it's not taken as serious, where people sit there and like a majority of games are lost, where games go on 20, 40 minutes and you just feel like you wasted your time, right? There's not an intrinsic reward that sits there and rewards your time. Your time doesn't feel respected. And as a college student, you have a lot of time on your hands, you know and sure, you can sit there and really go towards it, but not everyone has the luxury to sit there and just play video games all day to like practice. Some of them need to sit there. Their financial situations are not the best. They might have to go work. They don't have that same kind of um, what's the word? They don't have that same kind of environment like you'd see in traditional sports where, oh hey, I'm on the team. especially in a D1 and D2 environment where okay, being on the team is the job 24/7. Whereas in like in a D3, it's like okay, they're also an athlete, but it's a lot less strict, and they're probably still gonna end up working jobs if they need to.
I think there's also the comparison that between athletes and esports individuals is that it feels like you need more time to be able to compete in esports than you do in athletics. Because like in athletics, you're only in a practice at most 3 hours a day, and that's because physically you shouldn't be trying to do more than that unless you're already at like a pro level and you're trying to push the boundaries to the point of being like the next Kobe Bryant. But for most people, to be physically competitive for it, most of them are practicing 3, 5, maybe 5 hours a day. But then in esports, we're seeing people say that they have to practice 10 to 15. Do you think that there's a necessity for playing these many long hours for esports individuals, or is this just kind of a hyperinflated number to make it look like they're actually doing more than they are?
Well, when we look at it from the pro level, they're taking it like how we mentioned earlier. They're spending every minute looking on how to improve. They might be sitting there playing a matchup. They're utilizing that time to sit there and actually work on things in practice. Whereas in if you're just spending 15 hours a day playing solo queue, and you sit there and go 10 and 10 on the day, and you're only up, or you're probably down like 3 to 20 LP. Do you personally feel like you've improved, right? You might just sit there and like, oh, I learned this or I did this, but are you in a mental state to where you feel like you've improved, right? I bet of the times, and I've been on it as well, is that it doesn't feel that great. So the timing doesn't matter. Again, it's just the quality. It's not the quantity, especially like trying to get better, right? But when you're at that pro, then yes, then it matters because every hour you spend on it in an environment that is honed and focused, yeah, like that's gonna help you out big time.
So, as the last question I have, with Academy kind of falling apart, Collegiate looking like it's in desperate need of players, what do you think that players that are not quite even old enough to go for Collegiate should do to try to be able to help? Is there something that players, the handful of young guys that are out there that are playing that are like 16, 17? Is there something they can do from their end to try to make themselves stand out more to be the ones that are going to one of those bigger schools in collegiate?
Well, to the bigger schools, they're probably already getting scouted out because they're probably competing already in solo queue against some of their players that are already competing. So to that aspect, it's already kind of done as long as they're able to sit there and reach out and be like, hey, can you put me in contact with X, right? But for the player that might not be going to Maryville, etc., that isn't D2 plus, etc., you have to sit there and make the first move because a lot of the times the modes for recruitment for a lot of programs is through Discord, and that's practically it. There's some other ways, but they're just so lost, and because it's so scattered, no one really knows where to go, right? You have all these different high school discords that sit there and do their events, and that's kind of how recruiting is. There's now starting to be some more recruiting events where recruiters are invited out to like a finals competition for scouting, which is a great start. But um, the best advice I could give is just reach out to a college that has a program. Do your research on whether or not if esports is your life, you really want to play in collegiate, that's your goal, great. You need to sit there and find what colleges match your desire, and you need to see which where you would fit in. I would actually advise against just going to college just for esports. I think esports should be your secondary, and in your education matters more. Get a degree that's going to help you, because colleges is just getting more and more expensive. You don't want to put your foot in the hole for the likelihood of, well, and the realist, if you're not on, if again, if you're not on a real competitive collegiate team, you are not going to go pro. Plain and simple. Even though I hit challenger once and I'm only sticking D2, D2 masters, I am never going to go pro. A lot of players that have hit 1,000 LP for the last 6 years, um, people like Dragoon, people like Fire, right? They have the talent, have every means to sit there and go pro, can't go pro. So if they're struggling, then don't sit there and think of college as a means to go to pro. Think of college as a means to sit there and benefit you more in the financial side, especially when it comes to League of Legends. You're like, okay, I have a skill, I have an ability in League of Legends to where I am stronger than my counterparts. I'm going to sit there and apply and then receive an esports scholarship on top of academic scholarship. So reach out, show them your strengths. Be like, hey, I'm a plat 2 player. I'm extremely motivated. Here are my grades. What can you do for me? I'm really excited to play. That's all. You do that, you're gonna in contact with admissions, hopefully, if admissions does their job.
Oh, if only. Uh, well, thank you so much for joining me today, players. I appreciate you sitting down and chatting about some of this stuff. I think it's pretty insightful and pretty good knowledge for a lot of these folks that might have considered wanting to go into Collegiate League of Legends. And I want to thank everybody else who's been chilling in chat and watching this, and anybody that watches this on YouTube. If you end up enjoying this, feel free to follow the YouTube channel. Players, do you have anything you want me to plug for you on said video, or like any
Oh
link?
yeah. Oh yeah, you can just send them the Flaress 3 on Twitter. That works.
Oh, there you go. We'll plug his Twitter for you guys on there. So I'll be down in the description. And thank you guys for watching. And I hope you guys have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day.